attend. So we will do our usual thing of waiting for attendees to attend and get logged in. And so Janice is having tech support problems. So hopefully she will be in a minute.
Oh, I find the sound beginning.
Kinda, yeah.
I don't know what to do about it, whether it's a combination between the volume adjustment on the speakers and the volume adjustment on the screen.
Well, do you want to go to my computer? I don't know if it's any better.
Yeah, okay. That should improve with these.
Good. How's this looking out? Looks like it's really cutting.
At least I get it on. My hand was swollen the other night, so I couldn't get it on.
Huh.
Somewhat it swells up.
You know, you may be right about the Jello. I just took one of those little Jello with the fruit thing. It is very, very sweet. It's sweeter than sugar. So it's probably great sugar.
I think you should read the contents.
Yeah, that would be on the.
You might want to put your yourselves on mute there, Ed, and you hear.
Come on, Janice. I don't know why she doesn't try to sign on a few minutes early.
She's been struggling with it, she said. She's been trying to sign on with the ID code and the password because she had trouble with the link, or she kept the link or something. Anyway, Steve sent her again.
I'll give her a call here.
She's trying, but no link. Trying, no link.
Hello, Madam Commissioner. May I give you some tech support?
Hi, Sue. Sue B. Aziza was asking, are the public and residents going to be able to ask questions?
Good question. Not on the agenda.
B, Reg, somebody?
Yeah, I think they can ask questions, Penny. Thank you. Can you hear me? Penny,
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hold on, Sue. What?
Reg will announce, when Reg opens the meeting, he'll announce whether or not there'll be public participation, public comment.
Okay, did you hear that, Sue? Will he be able to see hands raised, Cheryl?
I think Steve is manning the Zoom controls.
Yes, I have the list up, so if there's a hand raised, I'll see it.
Okay, Steve says if there's a hand raised, you'll see it. Okay.
You can see you on the attendee list, and
Attendee,
Steve can
right.
promote you to a
Promoting her now.
panelister. All right, I'm going to hang up before we get feedback here, okay? So we can see you, Janice. Can you unmute yourself so we can check to see that you, we can
Okay, can
There
you
we
hear
go.
me?
say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I can barely hear you
Still
though.
can't hear you, Janice.
I can
I can
barely
hear
hear
it
you.
here.
Well, maybe I have mute on here. That's
Yeah.
my problem. Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah, but I can barely hear you.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're
How's-
like a 1.5 on the volume measurement. Yeah.
Okay, turn your volume up on your
It's-
iPhone.
it's-
there.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
We hear you
Yeah.
just the same. Can you hear us better?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
All right, yeah, just turn your iPhone up, volume up as to whatever is comfortable for you. Okay, I think we've got everybody here. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is a special board meeting of the Needham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. And I will call the roll. Reg Foster is here.
Eleanor Evans is here.
Ed Scheidler is here.
Penny Kirk here.
Janice Bennett is here.
And we have a quorum. And I just wanted to note for the record that this is being held as a virtual meeting as permitted by Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which were extended by order of Governor Healy on March 29, 2023, and in effect until March 31st of 2025. And also that adequate notice of this meeting was posted to the town clerk's office on April 25th, 2022. And we received a confirmation of the same here. So the purpose of this meeting is that the PRI team did not have all the analyses and documents completed for several agenda items that have to do with the PRI, which are kind of on the critical path. And I don't have any other announcements from the chair or any other agenda items. So we're going to just jump in to those agenda items and welcome our guest, Natalie Janssen of Cambridge Housing Authority, is a senior project manager. And Chris Moyers, our new assistant project manager. Joe De Lorenz has left for greener pastures somewhere out in the West. And Chris has been on the team, I think since the beginning of the month. So there's been a good chunk of overlap here. So, and we declared at our meeting the other day that his honeymoon period was officially over at this point here. So, so you folks have your agenda. We'll just work through it in order. These are all preservation and redevelopment initiative related matters carried over from last week's regular board meeting. The first of which is the new and updated PRI budget. And Natalie, if you could take it away, and Steve, if you can give Natalie screen sharing, which I'm pretty sure she's going to need. And my apologies to the board. We had a little, he was going to do it, she was going to do it mix up where we didn't get these documents out yesterday when they were, there's been a scramble to complete them. So I just wanted to acknowledge that you all have only had them since midday today, and it's maybe a lot to take in, and we can talk about that once now Natalie has a chance to present everything, this budget that we have is in the same format and the same approach that we approved last August, and is basically a major update to that budget, reflecting a much higher degree of certainty on projected costs and projected funding sources. So go ahead, Natalie, and take it from here.
Sure. Thank you, Reg. And I just wanted to start off by saying that it's great to be here. And so I'll share my screen and then walk you through the PRI budget that was updated. All right, can everyone see an Excel sheet?
Yes.
with
Is
different
it big
numbers
enough
on
for
it?
you to see? Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna just zoom out for a second. We're gonna zoom in as well. But I just wanted to go over first one point that Reg made. So the first thing that we did in updating this PRI budget is to update the project budget. So that's the second tab that's here. And those budgets are for, you can think about them in general for 3 different projects. So, and they reflect the task orders that the CHA has with the NHA. And so the first section up here for task orders 1 and 2 is general PRI support. So that's anything from putting together these types of budgets to the analysis that was done for the repositioning, that kind of work. And so what we did was to update it, but also to include the actual amount spent to date. But just quickly, before I go into details, I'll keep going with the general overview. So the first section is the general PRI planning and management, and that's mostly CHA fees. And then you have the second part of the budget are the Cook and Seabeds preservation project, and then also the Linen Chambers redevelopment project. So for these 2 budgets, what we did was update them to have better information. And so they include the cost of hiring an architectural firm, any third-party reports that would need to be done, such as environmental reports, looking at wetlands, looking at geotech. It also includes items like legal fees for zoning. And then also both of them include a contingency line item just to be able to cover unforeseen costs. So they're based on the best numbers that we have today, but it's also important to note that while they have gotten more specific since we last spoke, they're still estimates, so they tend to move a little bit. When we say that they're pre-development budgets, what we mean is that they would cover all of the costs leading up to a final construction closing and a construction start on these projects. After that, essentially the cost for the construction, the modernization of Cook and Seabeds, and also the redevelopment of Linen Chambers is not included as part of these budgets, because those will be included as part of the capital budgets for those 2 projects. So, you know, when I say that we have better information, but that some items are still estimates for Linen and Chambers, one of the main things that happened between August and now was that the Needham Housing Authority hired BH+A to do the architectural work for the project. So we have their architectural fee. So we were able to update that, and that's a pretty certain amount. But for example, for Cook and Seabeds, as we'll discuss later today, NHA still needs to go out and procure an architect. So, you know, it's an estimate, and we will see where those the proposals come in terms of price proposals. But part of the idea of having the contingency too is to manage some of that uncertainty around some items. You have a better sense of what the cost will be, but there's always a little bit of shifts. So that is, we also included here a new column that says cost paid, quote provided. And that essentially gives a little bit more sense of where we are in specific items, because there are some items where you have already done some work and paid for it. So we know that and we can track it at the same time. And these two, the cook seabeds, the linen chambers, also reflect the pre-development budgets that were submitted to the CPC. Are there any questions on this page?
I'm sorry, I'm not following you. When you said costs provided, where would that be?
So this is in column J, this blue item. So for example, to give an easy example here, for cook seabeds, there were 2 phase 1 reports.
I see it.
One for each property that was done. And so you have it here as the cost as part of the pre-development budget, but then we also carry it here because you've already paid for these costs.
I see. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I just throw in also a note that the 3 major chunks, the top chunk there, which it's hard to see on your screen, but over on the right, it says task orders number 1 and 2. And then the middle chunk, it says task order number 3. And the bottom chunk there says task order number 4. That's basically tying the budget to the task orders that we've signed with CHA to accomplish the various projects, with task order number 1 being the original task order from mid 2021, where we brought them in to launch the PRI here. And then, as we used up the funding that we got from the CPA for that, and the matching funds that we provided from our leftover High Rock Reserve, we did a task order 2 to continue that general management function. And when we came out of that first year and knew that we're going forward with 2 major projects, then that's when task order number 3, I'm sorry, it says 2, but it should say, 3, task order number 3 for Cooks and Seabed, and task order number 4 for Linden and Chambers were negotiated and signed with Cambridge Housing Authority. And down the road, if you look down below, there's a placeholder for task order number 5, which of course we haven't really gotten going on except for the existing conditions report. That's how it's organized. We keep track of the overall, cost projections of the project. So they've been seriously updated since last August. Let me turn it back over to you, Natalie, here.
So
I had a question.
another question regarding cost/paid quotes provided. So Natalie, these are the costs that
I believe my hand was up.
Sorry. Yeah, you both started at the same time here. So
Janice, you go ahead. I'll come back.
So Janice, you have
Muted,
to.
Janice.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Trying to
Janice.
find it.
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
Am I to understand that you're putting together that budget, linking the state and the federal together? I thought they were going to be separate.
So that's right, Janice. We are treating them as 2 separate projects. So essentially here is, if you can see the screen, it says Cook and Seabeds Preservation Project. So that's 1 pre-development budget for those 2 federal properties. And that ties into task order 3 that the CHA has with the NHA. And then below here is the Linen Chambers redevelopment project. which is its own separate budget that we're tracking.
So why are we lumping them together? I'm not getting that.
They're in separate category, they're in separate lines. And then if you go over to the right, you'll see that where it ties to the funding, which are either coming from state sources or federal sources here. So this is sort of to look at the overall, we can show it both separately and then also the PRI as a whole.
Okay,
across
she's
from
giving
both.
us an overall view. Is that,
Yes, that's right. So we know
Okay.
overall what we're spending, but we also keep track of it separately too.
yeah, okay.
All right, Cheryl, you're up next.
I'm just going back to task order 1 and 2, cost paid, quote provided. So those are reimbursables in the amount of 254,444 that the NHA will pay. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. So these are for the property conditions reports.
Mhm.
And so these are part of the, here, Cheryl, if you want to take a look, we have we basically broken out all of the CHA invoices that we've sent over.
So you've gone to another tab, is that right?
Yeah.
The
That's
last,
fine. I'm there.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
so
have it.
we added as just backup, we have a tab here that goes over the different invoices. And it
Yes.
includes the reimbursables for the various, the DEETS reports, and then also some of the, third-party services that they had, the sanitary scope lining, surveying, also the slab investigation, the envelope investigation, et cetera.
Yeah, I believe it's 15 altogether, I think, reimbursable invoices.
Right, that's right.
So this budget, the actuals are as of when?
They were as of the end of December, which is when we submitted the last invoice.
And we get billed quarterly from CHA, so we're expecting a quarterly invoice from you in 24 hours, right? Because it's due at the end of the month after the quarter. So the thinking again would be that this this then would get up once we get all the first quarter expenses, then this would be updated. So we can see what the actual expenses are relative to the estimated expenses and make sure we stay on top of any variations that are going to come along here.
Um, hmm.
Do you want
So-
to take it all, take in the other part of it and then circle back to your question, maybe, Cheryl?
Well, I think that I think the point that I'm making is that in addition to NHA cost, we also have that 254,444 cost that we are looking to, that we are going to encumber as well.
So what do you mean by NHA costs versus other costs when you say that?
Well, we have our Cambridge Housing Authority consultant costs at 300K, which also includes the CPA funding for 150K. In addition to that, we have 254,444 that we are reimbursing Cambridge Housing Authority for their upfront costs.
So the 254,444 are the property conditions reports where we basically engage DEETs through, from their stable, what they call house doctors, I guess. And we they made a proposal and we agreed to a proposal about a year ago to have those property conditions reports due. And then Cambridge pays Cambridge, they bill DEETs, Cambridge turns around and bills us. We then approve those and pay Cambridge, and Cambridge pays DEETs. So a number of our expenses are going to come through that channel. because one of the things we have benefits we get from Cambridge is being able to use their stable of consultants that they've already set up. But
Mhm.
other expenses, like if you scroll down to the Linden Chambers one, where we hired BH&A for 1.046 million, actually we're being direct billed by
Mhm.
that,
Right.
by BH&A. So it's tricky in that we have to sort of maintain both sort of models of getting charged.
Mhm.
When we do it through Cambridge, they add a 10% processing or management fee to theirs, but when we get it directly from BH&A, they don't.
Right.
And it's separate, obviously, from any hours that Natalie or Chris or Margaret spend working with BH&A, say having our biweekly meetings. Those are billable hours that they spend, which they charge us at so many dollars per hour for their time.
Right. Based on the, yeah, but I'm just, just pointing out to the board that, that 254.44 is an additional cost.
So one thing that I just wanted to highlight is, so it's not in addition to this total PRI, planning and development services of 545,000 that we've been. So it's not that plus that, this is a part of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clearing that up. Thank you.
But the other thing is, if you look at right there, we had a budgeted and estimated cost in those green boxes of 73,847, 63,133, 97,000, and so forth. And then that was what we budgeted. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Natalie, you're trying to show in the blue column what the actuals turned out to be.
Exactly. So in a way, it helps us both update the budget so that, it captures all of the costs, but it also helps you see where you are on those costs. So for example, here you're getting towards the end, right, of the property conditions reports. But if you look here, this is the pre-development for BH+A on Linden and Chambers. I need to update this based on the latest invoice that you sent, Cheryl, but just so that you can see, we're very early on here,
Yeah.
but just so that you can track it. And then, having, for example, A&E reimbursables, what we had budgeted for was 75,000, and then seeing here, what you've already kind of agreed to, which is the Hancock survey, as well as the arborist quote.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Well, so let me help with a segue here. So we can come back to the cost there, but I think the point is, if we look at the bottom line of the budget, go down to the bottom line there of the budget, we basically at this point are projecting nearly $4.5 million worth of expected costs based on what we've committed to right now. So the question then becomes, where is the heck is the money going to come to pay for that? And that is on the first tab that we're going to go to now.
Mhm.
So where is that nearly 5 million on the first page there? First tab.
You can see it right here at the bottom. But we kind of have to start at the top to make our way down to understand how we get to that amount.
Right.
So why don't I take
But
a
may I
step?
just say, before you're still there, at the bottom is a 5-line item summary of what takes a whole spreadsheet on the next work tab, just summarizing all the projects adding up to 4.498 million. Because this page is all about where's the money coming? What are the sources of funds to pay for these already incurred or estimated costs that we're projected that we're going to incur on that big spreadsheet we just spent the last 15 minutes on here. So back to the top goes Natalie,
Yeah, but it is a great point that ultimately this year, what I'm highlighting, which is the total costs here on the side, and then the total sources for those costs, is the project budgets in its most simple form. And then you can go through project budgets if you're curious about how a specific budget is that amount. But if we go up to the top, so as Raj pointed out, it's a $4.5 million pre-development budget. And so this top here is the funding that's already approved and committed for the PRI budget. And this is
By the board.
by the board. These are items that went to the board last year when the PRI budget was in front of you. And it's also items that went to the board as part of the planning for the capital fund program. So that's what you can see here, the federal capital fund program funding that was dedicated towards the PRI budget. So that all in all adds up to 2.76 million.
When was that dedicated?
So each one of the line items there, if you could scroll through the line items are there, Natalie, for me. Yeah, that's great. See where it says line items 1 through 17? You know,
Yes.
so if you look
Right,
at
I'm starting at number 9.
okay. All right. So, so at number 9, we presented the capital fund program budget last month for approval. And in that budget, we proposed to the board that enough analysis had been done by CHA and the NHA staff that we could spare some of that those capital funds for the PRI while keeping about 2/3 of them still for doing essential things at Seabeds and Cook before
Such as?
like roads, paving, just to pick, and the route, the pick the biggest ones, and then, the most needed thing that we talked about for a long time. But it's all listed in the document that you got in last month's board packet.
All right, so we're keeping the roads and the roofs, right?
Yes. And so, but it's actually lined in last month's board packet. If you open it up now or afterwards, if you want, you'll see line item by line item, what's being kept and we're still going forward with, and things that we, listen to the recommendations of, a combination of me, basically the CHA staff and the NHA staff, and said, we could spare, can you circle those ones from 10 down there, Natalie? So, out of, we get a pot of money every year. 2021 is already gone, but 2022, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And those, we spare, 50 to about 40,000 from each year.
Oh, okay, Rach, just to humor me, can she go line item 9 to 14, what we're giving up for the for the PRI project from our capital improvement? Can you just run that by us?
It's not in there, but I can try to pull it up while she continues to present the rest of this, and we can.
Just because a lot of residents, I think, are on listening, and
Right.
so yeah, just for the residents' benefit.
Yep, we can do that, but why don't we, we'll dig that out while Natalie keeps going, if that's okay, and then come
Okay,
back.
that's fine.
Yep.
Bye.
Sure. So the 2.76 is what's already been approved and committed by the board for PRI. And then the section here are items that are either for the future or that we're now seeking board approval to pursue further. So I will go through these line by line. The first one, and I think Cheryl, you have more information on this based on your recent analysis and conversations with HUD, but it's essentially allocating a portion of your federal public housing operating reserve to PRI. I think a part of the context that needs to be thought about in terms of this is that so the board made a decision to pursue the repositioning conversion of seabeds and Cook out of the public housing program into the Section 8 program. And so, and as part of that, you're required to do a rehab that's comprehensive of those two properties. So it's not, when the NHA is proposing to use some capital fund program to help with the pre-development costs for the preservation of seabeds and Cook, it's not as a way of getting around fixing capital issues of those properties, but as a way of making sure that you can get to a comprehensive modernization there. But it's the same thing with the Federal Public Housing Operating Reserve. Once you go through the conversion, you will essentially have created through the capital budget an operating reserve for seabeds and Cook that will be just for those two properties. In which case, you have some flexibility there to use part of your existing Federal Public Housing Operating Reserve for the use of pre-development expenses. And then it's a question of making sure that you maintain enough so that you can cover any current needs that you have. In a way, you have to maintain a portion for High Rock Estates, which will continue to be federal public housing until it converts, but also to make sure that you do have, a buffer for seabeds and Cook if it were needed. But I will let Cheryl jump in here to talk a little bit about what's needed in terms of the being able to use this Federal Public Housing Operating Reserve for PRI.
Thanks, Natalie. I don't have an answer on that. That 550 a reserve amount was confirmed by our fee accountant, Rich Shaw. I have an email in to Caitlin Johnson, our housing specialist, to talk about how we can use that reserve if we're allowed to use it, et cetera. I think it may be part of a larger conversation with Mara, O'Brien, Reg, myself, in terms of what, how to use it going forward, and particularly in light of what you just said, in terms of having once the properties are converted, having that having the adequate operating reserve for seabeds and Captain Robert Cook. So I will, once I hear from Caitlin, we'll have more information on how to proceed. But again, I believe it's a more complex conversation with Mara O'Brien, Reg, Caitlin, our Cambridge Housing Authority consultants, myself.
We certainly need to make sure they're okay with that, but we need to make sure the board is okay with that. So otherwise, there's no point having that conversation. I also want to just remind everybody that one of the tightropes we now need to walk for the next 2 years is we need to make sure we spend up all of our balances before we actually, cut the cord and do the repositioning, or those balances revert and we don't get the benefit of them. So just as a reminder, Cambridge Housing Authority consultants have been reminding us of that for at least 2 or 3, training meetings that, we have to walk this walk this tightrope between making sure we keep enough capital funds for what we need to do over the next couple of years, particularly the urgent and essential items, while, spending up the rest of it before we actually cut over. And also recognizing that some of the capital funds in the future years plans beyond, in 25 and 26 for Seabed and Cook, even though they may be in our budget, we are actually not going to get to, because by then we hopefully will have done the
Converted.
converted and started construction. So, you know, we need those, the other tricky thing, if you remember from our February meeting, is, you know, we have these property conditions reports that show, you know, sadly, what we already all knew, which is that the conditions were fair overall for Seabeds and poor for Cook. But we don't want to fix up so much right now in the next year or two that those reports become invalid. And then that kicks us into a whole reanalysis of how we actually do the repositioning. So there's several balls in the air here. Cheryl, I'm just saying, I'm not finding that capital report that I promised to pull up for Janice. So maybe you could look for that while Natalie continues here. Because we're just on the, she's just on the first line item there, which is using a portion of the operating reserve. My understanding is the operating reserve is overall, that would represent, let's see, where's my notes on that? Yeah, the overall, the balance in the operating reserve is $563,000 at the end of February, which is our last financial reports. So the proposal there, after consulting with our fee accountant, is that we could use up to 240,000 of the operating reserve and still have a very good cushion for whatever rainy day things might come along from the operating reserve.
Reg, is that for the federal public housing operating reserve or the operating account at High Rock?
That's the federal public housing.
Perfect.
563,882 was in our, you'll find that in your April board meeting financials, if you want to look for it there. Let's see if we can keep going to the next line item there, which is.
So the next line item is the operating account at High Rock Homes LLC. And this is also an item where we're looking for board approval to further study this. It requires, so I think this is where I got confused, Reg, because you just said 563,882. So it has this amount in the.
Right, you're right. Reread you're right. I'm wrong. I've got it backwards. 563 is the federal operating reserve. And you have, no, you got it backwards there.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it should be.
it's 550 for the federal.
And yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we just quickly update it live here?
Save that as 7.1, please.
Yeah,
Because, you know, we don't want to have the same versions just sort of miraculously changing itself here.
mhm. So the High Rock Homes LLC operating account, my understanding is that it's an account where at High Rock Homes LLC, where there's been cash that's been accruing over a set of time. And so here, what the next steps are is determining, one, if the NHA has been taking a cash distribution from High Rock Homes LLC over time. If yes, how much has it taken? Also, if yes, is it allowed to take more? And if not, how much has it not taken and how much should it take from this operating account? And then the other item is determining with Mass Housing what their approvals might be over withdrawing funding from that operating account. Any
If
questions on this one?
Why don't you run through them all and then we'll come back for questions here.
Perfect. The other one is also related to High Rock Homes. there's an account called the excess reserve. And essentially, what this represents, to my understanding, is the balance between what the NHA could have taken out of cash flow and then the additional cash flow that has been generated at the property. So this is something that there may be a potential to withdraw some funding from this account. Again, it would require mass housing approval. So that is something that we would need to explore further, and then explore also specifically in the documents for High Rock Homes LLC, how much cash the NHA is allowed to take from the property, as it's limited to a percentage of the equity that was put into the property at the start. The other item here is the NHA development reserve. And so you can see here that we have this column here that says amount potentially available, and that's so that you can get a sense of how much there is overall, but here's the requested amount. So in all of these cases, for the Federal Public Housing Operating Reserve, for the operating account at High Rock Homes, for the excess reserve, we're essentially expecting, we're modeling a lower amount, what we think might be feasible or might be desirable based on other NHA needs. Here on the development reserve, you have already committed 150,000 towards the PRI as kind of a matching grant to the CPA grant that you received. But in order to meet the overall, for this year, the $4.9 million budget, you would need to provide a little bit more. So what we put in here as a gap filler was 58,000. The ARPA funding of 1.25 million is probably familiar because it was included in this list last year in the PRI budget. We've included it here again because essentially this time, when we included it last time, we said that it would be available for construction activities at Linden and Chambers. But now, we are asking to make it available for pre-development use.
Well, actually, that's not quite what happened. What happened is that we applied to the CPC for money to finish out the pre-development, and we were trying to save the 1.25 million for construction, and that's what was in the budget last August. And we went and did that, and the CPC and the FinCom sort of looked at that and said, well, why don't you spend the 1.25 you already have in your bank account for pre-development and come back to us in the fall and ask for construction funds when you're further down the road in your design of the Linden Chambers redevelopment. And ultimately, if you recollect, we had to meet to withdraw the Linden Chambers CPA application for that pre-development. And so we showed this as something to be approved by the board again. It sort of goes without saying, but so that you understand that this is now money is going to be used directly and immediately in the next year and a half here. This is also money that has to be spent before the end of 2024, or it reverts to the federal government. And then one of the things that have been hanging over us and everybody else in the country is what's going on in Congress as of yesterday, which is there's a major attempt on the part of the Republican Party to claw back a lot of this ARPA and other money that hasn't already been committed and obligated and spent. So we've been kind of watching that carefully. And with yesterday's announcement, I don't know where all that craziness in Washington is going to go. If I did, I would, I'd quit this job and become something else. But, this it's probably a very good thing that we're, proceeding to spend this money right away, as opposed to waiting to the end of next year to have it be part of the construction funding.
Yeah, Reg, can I get a little more detail on the development reserve and what that's for?
Yeah, I've caused confusion. I renamed it, and I think we should carry both names on the spreadsheet for in the future, because I've managed to confuse everybody with
Yeah.
this. But it is what we used to call the management reserve. It's the 650,000 approximately developer fee that we received for doing the High Rock Homes development back in the aughts, 2008, 2009. And it's been just sitting there in our bank account against the day when we can use it for the next, to fund the next development. In this case, we're funding the Linden Chambers,
So
redevelopment.
that's money we actually made off
That's
the
money we made. It was
Rock
our profit as the developer. It was our
LLC
developer fee. Yeah.
operating. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's actually real. All this is real money, and these are real cash reserves on our balance sheet that have been sitting there for years, and that are, according to our Cambridge consultants, are available for the board to make the decision to deploy on doing, in this case, the Seabeds and Cook or the High Rock or the Linden and Chambers redevelopment, the modernization or the redevelopment. So what we wanted to reveal to the board tonight is that we haven't gone forward and obtained all the approvals for this, but it's, the intention of, management, meaning Cheryl and staff and our consultants, to open up those discussions with Mass Housing or with HUD as needed to get permissions to use this. And we've done we're not draining any of these operating reserve balances or anything like that. We're leaving, healthy remaining balances for, whatever rainy day thing, catastrophes come up. But we're sort of harvesting some of this cash in order to fund this $4.5 million budget that we have now. And the last slide, since I'm sort of come in, sorry about that, that's our CPA funding application that is before town meeting on May 1st. So it's sitting down there because it hasn't been approved. But with I think there's very strong support for that 85,000 to be approved by town meeting. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about these overall sources that were going in front of you for approval to continue to look into?
Yes.
All right, well then that brings us down to the bottom here. So this kind of is where it all starts to tie together. So you have the different projects here.
Natalie, I just completely had a brain fade here. I completely misspoke on line 35 there. That's not the current CPA application. That's shown up above on line number
8 here.
the problem is the type is a little small on my laptop. That was what I mistakenly thought it was. And what's down here is a projection that we would be going forward with more CPA funding from Needham, and that's a placeholder for that. But we won't need that for two years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, Natalie, keep going. I just wanted to correct my error there.
That's great. So here, just at the bottom to wrap it all up, you have the different projects here that we discussed at the start that are detailed in the project budgets tab. that add up totally to 4.5 million in total for the 5 different projects. And then on the side here, you have essentially all of those funding sources that we discussed, both at the top, the funding sources that we've already gone to the board for your approval, and then the funding sources that we're now seeking your approval to continue to look into. And so in some ways, you could probably notice here that this number that I'm going to highlight in yellow, 4.7 million, is more than the 4.5 million. There's 2 reasons for that. And this is where you look at the remaining balance here at the bottom. One item here is for the CFP funding that we talked about earlier. That's at the top, that the board approved last month. 200,000 of that is available, I believe, in 2025 and 2026. So it's a little late for the projects on the timelines that they are now. So that is funding that, you know, you will have remaining from this capital fund program that you could use for other PRI items. So, you know, a good candidate could be a future project at High Rock Estates. And then the other item is this little 20,938, which is, so for the Linen Chambers budget, you are balanced there between the ARPA funding that you have, as well as the 1.386 million that you received from the CPA last year. And so there's just 20,000 over, you know, probably for the sake of keeping it clean, I could probably throw that 20,000 into the contingency line item, and then you'd be at 0 there, because it's such a small amount. And another thing that's helpful about this table here is that you can kind of see how the different sources are being allocated by project. So for example, the ARPA funding here, it's just available for your state linen and chambers. And so you can see that it's only allocated towards the linen and chambers redevelopment project, which is on this line. And just as an example.
Any questions, anybody? Comments?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Eleanor.
What is the Partnerships for Growth Act?
So that is another earmark that you have for linen and chambers. I think it used to be up here. I believe it's for 1.5 million. It's not, there's a process that will need to, you know, that you'll need to go through in order to make that an appropriation. And so what DHCD has said is, once you've come along further for linen and chambers, then they will put that into their budget. And then you will have another, it'll be a 1.5 million that will be available for the construction of linen and chambers. That's kind of what it's earmarked for.
But that's not on this shown, the dollar amount isn't shown here.
No, it's not shown here in part because it's not available for pre-development.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe Eleanor's suggestion is a good suggestion, in that in this section here, you might list the Partnership for Growth in 1.5 million and then show 0 has been committed, because we have to go through this process. You could put that in the use there, you know, comment area. You could, you know, that would make things more sensible. But it's not like the ARPA funds. It isn't like appropriated for our use at this point. It's reserved for our use in the overall economic Partnership for Growth economic development bill. And we have to go through jumping through some hoops to get the money. And we'll certainly need it for construction.
Thanks.
Other questions? Maybe what I would like to do is to try to summarize what we've just been going through for the last 45 minutes here, which is the team, the work in progress report to the board is we have just rounding up a $4.5 million development budget. We see clarity. It's an estimate, but we see clarity that if our estimates are decent, that's what it's going to be between now and the end of next year. And we have identified with clarity, enough additional funding to cover that $4.5 million budget. But we still have some steps to take to confirm that. There's steps that Cheryl needs to take with HUD. And we're all working as a team. Cheryl and CHEA need to take with HUD, with mass housing, with our own, we'll probably check in with our auditors as well. We will certainly know next week, knock on wood, that we've received the $242,000 from the CPA funding award by town meeting. That's a really essential, huge, $250,000 we need to plug the gap here on the Seabeds and Cook project. What we'll also have is a major update. I'd love to have it ready by the May board meeting, but I'm not, which is, we'll start getting all the actual expenses for the first quarter plugged in. And then, you make estimates of what the expenses are, and then the actuals turn out to what to be. We have contingencies in most of these budgets for overages here. But, it's something that we will need to probably go into a quarterly review process with the board as these complicated and expensive projects unfold here. Our next board meeting is on 18th of May here. So, our good friends at Cambridge Housing Authority have sworn on a stack of Bibles and taken new vows to get timely invoices in, because there's a fair amount of expenses in those invoices here. And of course, we're getting billed monthly by BHNA, which is our other major expense.
Yeah, I would just add to that, again, pre-development budgets, they do get firmer with the more time that you've worked on a project, because you're getting more firm quotes. But they're also estimates, and it really depends on some of the complexity of the project. Also, we've seen some third-party reports really increase in costs that probably 2 years ago we wouldn't have been able to foresee. So essentially, it's both an element of including a contingency, but also continually updating it once you have better information for it, because there's still a lot in this budget that is based on estimates.
And I'm waiting for somebody to ask this question, but nobody has yet. But so I'm going to ask it for whoever's thinking it here, which is, so what happens if you don't get mass housing approval or HUD approval, or let's say that for whatever reason next week, let's take a simple one, a town example. What happens if town meeting doesn't approve the $242,000 for Seabeds and Cook pre-development expenses? And so we've been asking that question right along. That would, what do housing, Cambridge Housing Authority, what do housing authorities do in that sort of circumstance where we have this potential for doing the repositioning, but we don't have enough cash to pay the upfront expenses to, out of the reserves that we have? And the answer is that the Needham Housing Authority, which means the Needham Housing Authority Board of Directors, do one of two things. You either slow down or stop projects, or you go to a bank and you borrow the $241,000 and pay interest And you get a loan in this very tight borrowing environment because it's not unprecedented for that to happen. It's been said to me as I've learned about this that coming up with this pre-development funding is usually the hardest thing to do. One of the hardest things to do in trying to get something like this done. We haven't made a decision to do that. We've really tried to do is fund this through our own resources. I know that Rick, our fee accountant, has reported every month for every year at our budget meeting for years that I've been here that we are one of the best positioned housing authorities in terms of financial reserves and balances and resources. But I hadn't quite realized what that meant until we went through this exercise for the last couple of months of trying to come up with $4.5 million of pre-development expenses when you look at what we're trying to do with these two projects. So that's kind of where we're at. And that's the answer to the question that I think needs to be asked at this meeting. Any comments or thoughts from anybody?
Yes, Reg, is there
Yeah.
any way, how could we rally town meeting members? Or would that be illegal?
No.
So-
Every one of us should be contacting all our friends between now and Monday. It might be up on Monday's meeting, or it might be carried over to Wednesday, but the last few days, contact everybody. We've gotten very strong support from the select board and from the planning board and from even the finance committee and the CPC. Everybody thinks we're really on the right track with the Linden Chambers project and with the Seabeds Cook modernization. We got turned down on our CPC application with a message saying, we're not turning you down, we're just deferring you until the fall. And then they are expecting at fall town meeting for us to, if we can stay on track with Linden Chambers, to come in with a like $3 or $4 million request of town funding for the construction of the first phase of the Linden Chambers redevelopment. So there's strong support out there, but every bit helps between now and Monday. And I say this as a town meeting member. I've been bombarded with about 20 messages now to approve money for the honking of the trains, the quiet zone, to quiet the quiet.
Yeah, I'm on that
train
committee.
So they're that's only $1.5 million from town meeting, and I've gotten more emails as a town meeting member than I have on any other issue in a few years here. So, send an email to, make an email tree supporting that 242,000. Because I would say if we don't get that 242,000, we may be very seriously looking for, a loan because there isn't some, we've gone through everything, all our balances and all our orphan bank accounts and everything else. And, I think this is probably as much as we can spare from our balance sheets without jeopardizing, what people know I like to call mission number one. We got to make sure we keep the trains running on time and we have enough financial reserves to, make sure that we're being an excellent landlord at all times as best we can.
Okay, well, I'll be looking forward to maybe an email or some way I should rally the troops.
Okay.
Town
And
meeting.
we have a couple other agenda items. Janice, if it's okay with you, can I ask the team to follow with a email on, you wanted to re-review the capital fund monies in each year that was reserved out for the PRI, but you wanted to
Right.
see what was left. I
Yep.
just couldn't find my updated spreadsheet on that, but we can certainly get that out.
Yeah, that'll be helpful to the board.
And I guess I would, want some sort of a consensus or a vote of provisionally approving this budget as being on the right track, subject to running down to ground the various loose ends that we need to do and reporting back to the board when we do. Is everybody okay, comfortable enough at this point? And entertaining a motion to that effect.
I haven't heard anything from my, other than Eleanor. I haven't heard anything from Penny and Ed tonight at all. They there?
Yeah, we're
They're
here.
there.
Oh, okay.
They're riveted or stunned, one of the two. I don't know, but I'm myself quite surprised that we are this far down the road after trying to get here for many, many years. So I would wish that maybe not me, because I'm so deeply involved, but if the board is okay at this point, if they're not, we can wait until next time, but to sort of provisionally approve this budget subject to resolving all the assumptions and loose ends and updating it with the first quarter actual expenditures. A motion along those lines, if somebody is comfortable with that.
I so move.
Our treasurer moves that motion with respect to the $4.5 million budget. That's, I guess, appropriate, right? Is there a
Yes.
second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Evans. If there is no further discussion, I'm going to call the roll. Reg Foster votes aye.
Eleanor Evans votes aye.
Ed Scheidler votes aye.
Penny Kirk, aye.
Janice Bennett, both aye.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next agenda item. They shouldn't be as long as this one here. That was really complicated, and I understand that. So the second one, and there are two agenda items from last week that need to sort of be discussed together. One has to do with the 5-year HUD 5-year PHA plan, which we're required to have in place at all times and update periodically, and the timing for the submission of the repositioning application. So we were chugging along with the expectation by May 1st that we would approve the memo that I sent out another copy of earlier today, when we started digging in on the status of the 5-year plan we're supposed to have in place, and discovered that it got lost in the cracks during COVID. That it goes back, those of you with long memories, it goes back to when Jamie Barrymore, Barryman, yes, was hired to do two things. One is to update the AUP, and the other one was to update the 5-year plan. And one day she just dematerialized. This was in 2019 going into 2020. Angie Medeiros took on the operating procedures document, which was, without any consulting help, and we got that done. But the other plan fell into a crack, and it remained there until we discovered it was still in the crack. I'm not quite sure when did we discover that, Cheryl and Natalie here, that it was not where it was supposed to be.
She sent a 2020 5-year plan to HUD, not to be confused with the capital action plan, but the 5-year plan. And that one was not approved. There were documents that were needed that were not submitted, and it fell between the cracks.
And that was at the end of 2019 or early 2020, or when was that?
Yeah, early 2020. So,
yeah, and then March of 2020, COVID hit.
Yeah.
Here we are. Natalie, why can't we just submit this repositioning application anyway, and without an up-to-date 5-year PHA plan?
So typically HUD wants to see that any reposition activities that it's part of if you have to do an annual plan or a 5-year plan, it should be in those plans so that residents and other community members have had a chance to see it, and that it's part of the overall policy. So you could you could try to submit the application, but then there's a high risk that essentially they would make you redo it once you have the 5-year plan in place. It's something that it's kind of a critical item for HUD to make sure that it's included as part of your overall policies.
And how many times have I asked you in the last month, isn't there some way around this?
A
I
couple
can
of,
answer that, Reg. There's no way around it because it's public housing, it's public input. If they don't have it, you don't get it. We don't get it.
That doesn't mean I didn't ask 5 times. There's got to be some way around this. So,
I spoke with Caitlin today about
Hmm.
that. And we do have to have a document in place for review by RAB board and public, and then post the 45-day period. So just so you know, and we do have to have the information in there, of which I will lean on you, Reg, and Cambridge Housing Authority regarding the information for the PRI, for the repositioning of our federal properties. The plan is really essentially just forms that need to be submitted to HUD, but there has to be comment on that. So I'm hoping that we can have a good draft mid-May, or yeah, well, after
For
our
the next board meeting.
No, that's perhaps.
Cheryl, I have reached out to a few people to get that RAB board in place so we can get some of that documentation approved. I think I should have an answer probably by early next week for you on putting together that RAB board.
Great, thank you, Janice. So I think I mentioned in our check-in meeting that, you know, my goal this week was to get the FSS admin plan out. And that's about 96% completed, and that will be submitted to HUD first thing tomorrow morning. And my focus will shift towards pulling together the documentation that's needed for the 5-year plan.
And if you sort of kind of roughly look into the future, you know, if Cheryl can get that draft document done by mid towards the end of May, and again, I think we should all, as a board, be very careful about leaning on Cheryl too much here in her first few weeks and months of being the new executive director, because there's all these balls in the air, as we know, you know, taking on a position like this. But if she can do that, you have to publish the draft plan before you then do your 45-day notice for your public hearing that you have to have on it. So that takes us into, you know, at the earliest, probably end of July, you know, August timeframe to have the public hearing. You know, there might not be very much input, but you have to do that. You have to provide that much notice. And then you can finalize the plan and submit it. But it looks like what we were planning to do with this repositioning authorization that we were going to consider last week can't be done by the board to authorize the submission of the applications voted until after that plan is in and accepted by HUD, and that's we're in September. So unfortunately, we've taken a 4-month delay. Again, I don't want to throw any mud at anybody, any past administrations. But I remind everybody that we didn't have that plan done, but we didn't have a plan to get it done. But we also didn't have the ACOP done. It hadn't been updated. I just looked now since 2011, and we were at 2019, and it was a mess. You know, so that was triaged, and we got that one done, and mostly Angie got it done, and then we had a little minor issue like the pandemic to deal with for the next year or 2 or 3. So
well, let's just look forward and go forward.
And that's all you can do. Exactly. So thank you, Janice, for helping Cheryl to expedite whatever you can help her with on that. That's
Sure,
great.
sure, you know.
And Natalie, I warned you I was gonna ask you this question yesterday when which is, so what does it mean, if, we can't submit the repositioning plan, until the fall with respect to the overall schedule here for the seabed cook modernization?
Right. So Margaret and I had a conversation about this. I mean, essentially, there's a process that the NHA needs to go through for the RAD Section 18. So we were originally planning on submitting the repositioning application at the end of this month, right?
Mhm.
But given the fact that it's been pushed out by 4 months, that pushes out the whole process. So I won't go through all of the different steps of the process, but essentially it results in this final financing plan submission to HUD. And so with a 4-month delay, that's likely to be pushed from May of 2024 to September of 2024. I think one of the concerns there that we have is that that may not leave enough time for HUD to essentially go through its process to be able to close at the end of the year in 2024 for Seabeds and Cook.
Mhm.
The other issue too is that you really push out the Cook Seabeds closing towards the end of the year when it's a little bit more of a so in order to do these projects, you need to get a tax exempt bond allocation. And the sooner you get into the year, the likelier it is that you may have a situation where you get bumped into the following year, because essentially there are other projects that are in front of you. Sometimes they require more tax exempt bonds than they initially provided. And then essentially they make a decision to bump you to the next year. And so we think that there's, a risk here that with this kind of unexpected delay, that it may push the Seabeds and Cook closing until 2025. So not the end of next year, but the start of the following year.
Okay, but not a whole year push.
No, it won't be a whole year. I mean, you can probably think of it as like a 4 to 5 month delay.
Okay. So, any questions from board members on that update here or comments other than keep soldiering on? Go ahead, Penny.
This may not be appropriate right here, but I don't know what it might be, but I have a comment about the report about the status of the conditions at Cook and Seabeds.
Yeah, let me hold that for the second, and we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so don't forget. If I forget to call on you, let me know. Okay. Any other questions on this status update? It's a board information, major board information item, but it's not. We're not asking for a decision on anything. It is what it is here. And I guess Cheryl, if there's no other comments, I just want to say I officially declare your honeymoon period over at this point here.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, she's done.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item number 3, which is we have been we meaning again the whole team, but mainly Cambridge Housing Authority consultants have been working to perfect a RFP for any designer services, start doing the designing and of all these modernization, things we want to do. And Natalie, would you be recommending that we go ahead and issue this we were going to approve it tonight or last week and then go ahead and put it out in the street and have somebody on board by midsummer? Are you recommending that we continue to do that?
Yes.
As opposed to delaying for 4 months?
I think you'd want to get started with the process. I mean, you get a little bit more time, which is helpful in terms of, these, in terms of having good amount of time for NHA to review the work that's being produced and also to make decisions. But also, I think it's important to keep going with the process because ultimately, 4 to 5 months delay on the big scheme of things is not that much. And so, and you need to do the architectural process because essentially the repositioning option that you've chosen is dependent on the scope of services or the scope of work that you will do at the properties. So you'll need to continue to essentially work with the architect to get that into a good place to be able to continue with the HUD process all along.
Well, and also we don't get to the new nearly $1 million a year of subsidy. We don't get that faucet turned on until we start on day one of construction doing it. Is that right? Still?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is work we're going to have to do anyway. And, it may or may not get done sooner than we can get the financing put together, but it's certainly not going to waste. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay. Questions from the board members? Any questions about the document itself, and recognizing that, again, the intent was to get it to you earlier than today or yesterday, but even earlier than yesterday. Natalie tells me that that's a standard RFP document that they've been using for many other projects. Both the boilerplate at the front, describing the project has actually been recycled from other materials we've already done. And then there's a contract attachment is the other major attachment, which is you send out to proposed bidders and to say, look this over, this is what we want you to sign.
Yeah, can I just interrupt you for a minute, Reg?
Sure. Yes, please.
I just want to say 4 hours was not enough time
It's not. I totally.
for us to make an informed decision. I mean, just own that right now because, and I don't think any vote should be taken until we get to take a good look at it. My opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I totally own it. It's just the way it is. The other thing I was going to say is in reviewing the last draft, Cheryl and I and Steve work, sort of, being the NHA side of the team here, mentioned, it said to the Cambridge folks that we would like to run particularly the contract document by Jonathan Driscoll, our general counsel, for comment. And ask him to weigh in because, this is something where we're going to be signing up for, we think, about $1.3 million worth of services. The estimate's correct. The last RFP we put out, Ed was on the evaluation team, that was all preordained and pre-specified by DHCD. So there was nothing we could change about it anyway, the contract or anything else. But in this case, being the federal side thing, we're provided more latitude, to act in our fiduciary capacity as a board. And I mentioned to Natalie and Margaret and Chris that, we wanted to run the document past Jonathan Driscoll for any comments and edits he wants to add here. So it's not quite ripe enough. But I guess I would wish to ask the board's indulgence if they would be willing to consider another special board meeting sometime next week at our own convenience so that we could approve it next week when everybody's had the proper time for review. And so it could go out and we would still sort of be able to, there's a whole process like we went through before of evaluation committee and so forth. We have to go through that procurement process and to select the finalists. So that in and of itself takes 2 or 3 months to do. So
I'm all good with that, Reg, but I have a request to make.
Sure.
Is there some way that I could upload photos to the chair of certain things that I'm concerned about. Like for instance, my patio, the back patio, this is something new. I have a whole
Absolutely.
line of poison ivy coming up from underneath my
I
my house.
thought you were going to say fire ants, so I'm glad it's just poison ivy here. But no, actually, please go ahead and do that. But also, when you do get a chance to read this RFP, it spells out the process that the new architecting team needs to do. And the very first thing they do is they have a series of meetings with the residents and say, you've been living here for the last 20 years or 10 years or 1 year. You know more than anybody else what's wrong with these places. Fill in anything that may have gotten missed before.
Good, tell them to come to my house.
Yeah, you think I'm joking, but that's exactly what's going to happen as sort of the first step when you get a chance to read the process in the RFP. So,
yep, I just had my landscapers come yesterday and do my mulch and clean up my patio garden. And, I said, no, don't touch that. I need to save that.
Like fruit.
you got to protect the NHA from liability. Penny, I think we have one more agenda item that will be hopefully not too long on zoning, but Penny, you had an item that you wanted to bring up about the existing conditions report. Sounds like the same,
Yeah, well.
topics we're
the first
talking
thing
about.
is a question on page 87 of everything we got today. It states that after the April 11th meeting with the residents, with 13 residents, that there would be a report going out. And as far as I know, there's no report going out, and there are a lot of residents who are very, very concerned about timing particularly, and how much time they'll be out of their units.
Natalie, Chris, do you have an
As soon as
ETA for
possible,
that?
They need to get something reassuring.
Yeah, Natalie, Chris, you have an ETA for that?
Yeah, so we'll get that out next week, aiming for early next week to the residents, and it'll be kind of like a Q&A. So these were the questions that were asked, and here are answers.
Okay, and now the other thing is, having read the report about the status of the buildings, particularly at Cook's, the condition report, I'm appalled at the status of these buildings. They're going to require an enormous amount of work, not just a new kitchen and a new bathroom, but floors and walls and insulation. And I'm just wondering, there has to be an estimate for how long people are going to be out of their houses. And it seems like it's going to be a lot longer than a few days, which is what I've been saying to them. A kitchen and bathroom, it doesn't take that long. But the other idea is, it's mentioned that you're going to, at some point, we're going to consider doing another 4-unit building. And my thought is to consider making a 4-unit, wherever you'd put it, I can't imagine, but a new 4-unit building where people could start moving in when the other buildings are going to be worked on. And also to consider doing a cost analysis of how much it's going to cost to repair these old buildings as compared to tearing them down and building brand new, fresh buildings. I know it's way out of the ballpark, but.
Well, no, great minds think alike, Penny.
I'm with you, Penny.
Great minds think alike, because you'll see when you get a chance to read the RFP that some of what you suggested was put into it when it was, being customized from the boilerplate that we got from CHA. So you'll see that there's been added a master planning process to the front of it that says you're going to look into this sort of questions, particularly, should you, to deal with the swing space issue, should we be building something new first and then using that for either the seniors or the families to sort of cycle through while their units are being renovated? So So that master planning process has been put in there, and I think we can also revisit one more time the tear down question, but it was visited before, but we can revisit it one more time during that stage in the RFP.
Well, was it visited before the detailed inspection took place? Because it sounds as if, you know, you're gonna have to take floors up and it really
So-
sounds very.
Yeah, here's the, yes, it was, but it's not something we mentioned very much because the problem is that new construction has risen to about $400 a square foot. So if you multiply out all the, you know, the construction costs for new construction have gone through the roof, which has made it relatively more cost effective if you can renovate an existing structure relative than building it all upfront, from scratch. That's changed that cost equation, but it should be looked again. I totally agree with you. And take a look when you have a chance to read the RFP, you'll see that there is that master planning stage. Or we could add another sentence and say, just double check one more time that, it's not more effective to just tear them down than it is to try to gut renovate them or modernize them. I think that's right. It's not a wild.
Janice today, to me, it sounds like taking an old lady and putting her in a prom dress.
Please, we're not allowed to have those sort of analogies anymore. And
Penny,
this woke world here, Penny, please don't put me in a position here.
I'll add my analogy. It's like taking a power wash to High Rock Estates. You might
Yeah.
knock them down.
Well, again, I'm going to, on those great comments, I'm going to move to the last agenda item, if that's okay. Zoning update. So there's some really sort of new news that's is arising for the Linden Chambers project. And it's a result of having a hired local zoning council, to go analyze all the town records on how the Linden development and the Chambers development was took place in the first place in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. Okay. And there's going to be a paper that comes out on this. So I'm just going to summarize it here. But basically, it's uncovered as a result of the analysis that there are things that need to be fixed legally in the town records and the registry of Norfolk County Registry, probably, and that you actually need town meeting to approve these fixes. And I'm not going to get into detail. They're not showstopper fixes. I don't think it's going to get in the way of the project, but just as a part of a procedural thing, we had been looking at 3 different ways of getting the zoning needed to do the Linden Chambers redevelopment at the end of 2024, started at the end of 2024. And one of them was that we would do a special 40B project, what they call a LIP, a local initiative program, where you basically work with the select board and town council and DHCD and get that decreed by DHCD, and then you get the zoning board of appeals to approve it. So that's one mechanism that towns use to do this. And the second mechanism was to discover in town records that the town had granted the land to the Needham Housing Authority in perpetuity, and that had authorized us to do whatever we felt like doing on Linden Chambers. So if we wanted to go from 151 units to 252 units, that was already authorized in the 1960 special town meeting. Well, it not only turned out not to be already authorized, it was really the opposite that was found, which are these things that need to be fixed, as well as the zoning. And the third way that has always been there is to do it the old-fashioned way. All zoning articles, or most zoning articles, are done in town, which is you work with the planning board, you develop, let's say, a special overlay district for the Linden Chambers 8.2 acres, and you take that to fall town meeting, and there's a big debate, and you have a vote on it in town meeting, In this case, it would require a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote, because of a recent, statewide change that was made for affordable housing zoning articles here. But, and it turns out that there's no magic bullet in the town records. It's really the other way around. There's some stuff that needs to be cleaned up. Cambridge did a analysis, Natalie did an analysis of how long it would take to get a friendly 40B done, and it would take beyond our horizon for getting funding applications into the state by the end of the year. And also, given the nature of what's in the town records, it probably isn't appropriate to try to do a friendly 40B anyway, because other things need to be changed at town meeting. So that leaves us with going back to the planning board and doing it the old-fashioned way, by working in partnership with them to get the zoning articles we need drafted, or the amendments drafted, and have public hearing in the middle of the summer, and bring that to fall town meeting on the first week of October or so, 2023. And so that's where we've arrived at that, tentative conclusion. And I wanted to just let the board know about that tonight, because we're going to be going out with that story, I think, next week to the planning board and to the planning department. And we'll be on the agenda sometime in May, explaining it to the whole board, and planning board, that is. They have previously indicated in our first meeting with them that they're quite willing to do this for us and for this project, if that turns out to be the right answer, or the only answer, or both. And so we'll be going public with this within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I just thought certainly before our next board meeting. And so I just want to let you folks know that's where things are heading for this particular major issue that needs to be resolved here. Any questions or comments? Natalie, did I miss anything on that one?
No, I think that was very comprehensive.
And any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment on another matter, but that was a very good comprehensive statement, and certainly something to think about. Super Zizo would like to comment. I don't know if it's a public meeting. Is she entitled? I don't know.
I'm happy, if the board is happy to entertain a few minutes, 3 minutes or something, sure. But no, it was not, this is not a public hearing or a public meeting on that. But, in generally, it's been our policy, if we're talking about things that affect tenants or tenants organizations, absolutely. Is everybody all right with Sue being given a few minutes here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And while Sue's getting warmed up there, I just wanted to close the zoning thing by saying that the time is tight to get articles before a fall town meeting, and it's going to take quite a bit of effort on our part and quite a bit of effort on the planning board part. And like I said, they've indicated they're willing to do that, but we'll have certainly better visibility on that in the next month here or so.
Well, we'll be here for you, but it'd be a good idea to get the information out in a timely manner, so we could, form a good opinion,
we just, it's just the way it turned out this week, and I apologize for that. We shouldn't, I thought it was better to just have this update than it was to, even when we, failed to get timely information.
Yeah, but it's nothing to really rush into.
Yep, absolutely. Sue, I think we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Number one, we have been promised up here on Seabeds and down on Cook's Bridge, pavement repair, and we cannot afford to wait another 2 or 3 years to get it done. We had money removed 7 or 8 years ago for some other project that nobody seems to know anything about. The pavement, at least up here, is very, very dangerous. Not only to people, with physical disabilities, there are visual disabilities. People's cars are getting damaged because of these potholes. Now, I don't understand, we don't need an architect to pave at least part of the parking lot up here for now, until we can get it, professionally done in a few years. We can't wait any longer. It's just, it's an absolute disgrace. Your maintenance guys will tell you, your staff will tell you, what it's like. So that's that. And in the last couple of weeks, I've had residents from both sides of town, high anxiety about moving, okay? What I'm suggesting is for those folks who may have a social worker or a supportive family to find out their addresses, and any information that gets sent to the resident should also be sent to their families or their social workers to help work with them, especially those who've got mental health issues. I know that's thinking way outside the box, but I think it might be a very good idea.
So important, Sue.
So,
Sue, thank you very much on both comments, and I think we all agree with the second comment you made, that we absolutely got to be as sensitive as we can. Hopefully, when we get this Q&A out from Natalie next week, which addresses some of these questions, I don't know if that'll help or hurt, but I think that Margaret and Cambridge, gave Margaret, they're just transcribing Margaret's answers to that. But it's totally understandable. It doesn't have to be a mental health issue person. Any person, myself, and would be concerned about what you raised there, and I totally agree with you on that. On the first comment,
we want that pavement done.
I'm just getting to that first comment, and the first comment is that I think I'm not putting words in Natalie's mouth, or Margaret is not here tonight, but Cheryl has been saying exactly the same thing you did. We got to make sure we make progress on that. Something has been promised for a long time. Steve, as Cheryl's predecessor, said the same thing, and I, as the predecessor of both of them, unless we're going to go back to 2009, are been saying the same thing as well. So absolutely, we have heard you loud and clear, and that's absolutely understand that.
Okay, so when can we see the work getting started? I don't want to see, well, we'll try to start it next month or something, but no, when are we going to see exactly when the work gets started?
That's
Cheryl,
day-to-day operations, so
what's the-
Cheryl will let you know.
What's
Okay.
the current, yeah, thanks, Sue, I appreciate it. Cheryl, if you could just do a minute, and then I'd like to adjourn on
Yes.
what the time frame is for that.
So I do have a proposal, an RFP from a civil engineer. And I just asked another architect to spec out the job for us. In particularly, Sue, to address the areas that are most hazardous. And he's putting together an RFP for me as well. Those two RFPs will allow me to make a decision on where to go. We have to do the RFP because of procurement. There's a lot of money that's going to be spent on those projects. So we have to satisfy procurement by getting this information out first, and then starting the job, putting the job out for bid and hiring a contractor. So we're moving along with that, Sue. It's unfortunate that it's taken this long, but we are moving. We had an architect out there Tuesday, I think it was, or Wednesday, to look at the roofs, or rather for a pre-construction meeting. And I asked him to walk the site and give us a good assessment on what can be done now, what needs to be done right away. So we're working on that. We've got.
Let me just close the meeting here, but just some simple questions. Cheryl, is it fair to say that we have money in the budget to get going this year, and we will be getting going, after we go through these procurement steps later
Absolutely.
on this year
Right, absolutely.
on the
Yeah,
highest priority safety
Highest.
hazard items.
that's right.
And, and yeah, I want to chime in also. It would have been so nice if we could have gotten that in conjunction with the St. Mary Street construction going on to get it all done. And that's a shame because, money could have been saved there if anybody really knew. I mean, it was in touch with the town.
Yep. Unfortunately, that's town road and we're private road here. So it's,
Yeah, but they would work with us.
They live in two stovepipes, but I think I'm going to declare, so Sue, thank you very much for your comments. And I think we're at the end of our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Should we say something about the special meeting next week?
Oh, go ahead.
Availability or-
Well, I was going to, you're saying what date and time? Yes, go ahead and say something. Yep.
Well, I'm available anytime after 3:00 every day except Thursday next week.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind a Saturday 10 o'clock meeting.
Well, Saturday the 6th is the Mexican musical event at Chambers Street.
Oh, okay. Well,
So, all right, we got the 3rd at 6 o'clock. Does anybody can't make that? That's Wednesday. And I have town meeting, probably that at 7, so it would have to be a fairly short meeting here. Or 7.
okay, let's go for Wednesday at 6.
Wednesday at 6, okay.
Well, I was gonna say it might be tough for me to make that one. Just because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get home in time to do it. And if I stay at work, then I have to stay late before I can get the train.
Fortunately, I probably can't do it after, later that evening because I got Monday and Wednesday town meeting here.
What about the 4th? Or the 2nd?
I'm good on the 4th.
There's a Democratic Town
Committee. at
Committee
7
at 7 o'clock, yeah.
And on the 2nd,
On the 4th,
On the
but
4th.
we could do 6 o'clock.
well, we can do 6 o'clock on the 2nd. I think, does that give everybody time to read
Okay.
through the document?
Well, I guess one thing is like, let's see, is it possible to do it earlier than that? Like to do
You
it
can do
at
it
4? If it's,
Yeah. How about 4 on the 2nd here?
Yep,
Going once, going twice. Okay, sold to the Board of the Needham Housing Authority here.
and that gives enough time for the notice?
Yeah, if it goes out tomorrow.
Steve, would you be able to do that? I'm in a training all day tomorrow in Framingham.
Yes, that's to you, Steve.
Yes, I can do it.
Okay.
Just need an agenda.
Okay, so I can get that to you tomorrow morning. It's really it's just taking agenda item number 3, cloning the agenda we already have here and doing agenda item number 3.
Just number 3, I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, gentlemen and
Yeah.
ladies, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. We're the little engine that could here. We're just chugging along. We think we can, and to be continued to next Tuesday. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.